Senator Hughes, you're recognized to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1601.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 1601 deals with something we've learned a lot about over the last several years, and that's Drag Queen Story Hour. Not drag shows, which we've understood for a while, have been around for a long time for adults, and been a lot of discussion about that. Drag Queen Story Hour, of course, we understand is focused on children. These have been hosted in various municipal libraries across the state: Dallas, Houston, Austin. According to the founding organization's website, they're usually geared for children ages 3 to 11 and are hosted by drag queens who read children's books. And from their terms, from their description, the program strives to, quote, capture the imagination and play of gender fluidity of childhood, and gives kids glamorous, positive, and unabashedly queer role models, end quote. Again, ages 3 to 11 is how Drag Queen Story Hour is described. The intended audience, ages 3 through 11. We've learned that certain libraries in the Houston Public Library System used to host these story hours until they were alerted by the public that one of the participants was a registered sex offender. And after confirming the library had been inviting and hosting a registered sex offender to read to children, the library admitted they'd not done the background checks on the participants. The Senate Bill 1601 is very straightforward. It says if a municipal library hosts one of these events, they don't get any state funding. Now, to be clear, here's what's covered by the bill. To be barred from state funding by this bill, a library must host an event at which a person presenting as the opposite sex reads to a minor, and being dressed as the opposite sex is a primary component of the entertainment. It's a very short bill, a very straightforward bill, and I move suspension of this in its regular order of business.
Secretary will call the roll. Oh, late button, but we saw you. Are you wishing to speak?
Question for the operation for the authors to how the bill would operate.
Of course, I'll yield. Of course.
So I often read to my children when they were young, and I would read to them, and I would read to their class often, and we would use costumes. And sometimes I would don the costume of a male character. And it was integral to the performance to put on the costume of a male character to read the story, whether it was Harry Potter or whether it was Fablehaven or any number of series books that my kids in their class enjoyed. Wouldn't I run afoul of this bill for donning a costume of a man to read a portion of Harry Potter or Fablehaven to my kids' class in the library?
Yes, Senator, only if being dressed as the opposite gender was an essential, was a feature of the performance. Again, not what gender that the character happened to be, but if the person dressed as the opposite gender, if their dressing as the opposite gender is, to be clear, a primary component of the entertainment, that's the only way that would be affected.
And I will tell you that when I read to my children and their class, me playing Gandalf in a man's outfit was a featured aspect of reading that story.
If the person being dressed as the opposite gender is a primary component of the entertainment, that's affected by this bill. That's what we're talking about.
I'm way illegal then. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton.
21 ayes, 9 nays. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out in second reading. Senate Bill 1601. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 1601 relating to prohibiting municipal libraries that host certain events from receiving state funding.
There is an amendment, members. Hold on one second. Members, we're passing it out now. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Springer.
You're recognized on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment clarifies that state funds cannot be awarded to public libraries, and also that no public monies can be awarded to public libraries that has public performances in drag. And with that, I move
Hughes.
adoption.
Mr. President, this is acceptable to the author. I thank Senator Springer for offering a great amendment. I'll be voting aye.
Secretary will call the roll. Is there objection? Hearing none. Amendment is adopted. Following amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 2 by Menendez et al.
Senator Menendez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this is a simple amendment that would insert the same language we've seen in a few other bills concerned about what children see. It would simply add a new section to the bill stating that entertainment must appeal to the prurient interest in sex, just like what is in Senate Bill 13 regarding library books that are available at our children's schools. Members, we simply want clarity on what the concern is and what we thought would be only logical to stay consistent with other bills that are changing how we regulate our libraries this session. There is some concern that the current language would ban items such as allowing a parent or a librarian dressed as a superhero of the opposite sex to read at the libraries. Members, I think it's imperative that we be thoughtful in how we treat every one of our families in our state. And I would hate for a parent who happens to maybe dress in a suit, and maybe they were born as what somebody would say, they were born female and they dress in a male suit with a tie, and someone would say that they were breaking the law or not allowed, or that the library would have a problem with that. And as you can read the amendment, it appeals to the pure interest of a minor in sex, nudity, or excretion. It is patently offensive to the prevailing standards of the adult community as a whole with respect to what is suitable for minors, and it is utterly without redeeming social value for minors. So the amendment speaks very clearly to what is allowable for minors. This is tested law, and it's current in our current code and state law. And so I think it was only appropriate that we clarify Senator Hughes' bill so that it won't have any problems as it moves through the process.
Senator Hughes on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank Senator Menendez for the discussion, and very important on the last bill, because that was a bill that applies to any performance in front of a child. And of course, if it appeals to a prurient interest, that's affected everywhere, as it should be. This bill is much narrower. And again, lest we forget, Drag Queen Story Hour, geared for children ages 3 through 11, strives to capture the imagination and play of gender fluidity, of childhood, et cetera, et cetera. That's what this bill's about, and so I'll be respectfully voting no on the amendment.
Senator Zaffarini, what purpose?
So the author of the amendment.
Do you yield? I'm sorry.
Yes, of course, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Menendez, who co-authored this amendment with you?
This amendment is co-authored by you, Senator Zaffarini, by Senator Eckhart, by Senator Alvarado.
And I believe there were other Democrats who were going to co-author it, but there was no time to get other signatures. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And is it your understanding that if this amendment is accepted, that then the Democrats will vote for this?
Yes, that is my understanding. Yes.
Thank you. And if this amendment is accepted, I certainly will vote for it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Members, the motion is on the, Senator Hughes, any comment? You're fine. The vote is on the amendment. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell.
12 ayes, 19 nays. The amendment fails. You are recognized. Passage to engrossment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment.
Secretary will call the roll when ready.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton.
20 ayes, 9 nays, and 2 present not voting. We'll hold there.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.